So today we're going to talk about how flight schools and flight instructors, mostly flight schools, price their programs for training. We're going to show you why they can show you such a low price and why they never really meet that price that they quote you. So let's get into it. So when you're going for training, they're going to talk about hours that are required for each level of training, whether it's private, instrument, commercial, CFI, whatever. Let's talk private because that's where most people are going to be. That's where all students start out, unless you go the sport route or something like that. But most people start out private, and that's kind of the biggest entry point and where most of the students are within the industry. So let's start there. So in the FAR AIM, you're going to look up 61.109, and that's going to give you the aeronautical experience requirements that a school is required to teach you to make you eligible to take the check ride, the test, to be able to become a certificated pilot at that level. So what they do is, when they're pricing out these programs, is they do some math, and we're going to do some math here today. I'm going to show you exactly how they price it out and why most people at the end are left wondering why they spent more than they were quoted. So, what are the experience requirements? Well, the big one is if it's Part 61 training, it's 40 hours minimum to become a private pilot. Now, that's 20 hours of training with a flight instructor, such as myself, and 10 hours requirement of solo flying. So that leaves like an extra 10 hours you get to play with if we're playing along with the math here today. So let's look at what that looks like. I'm going to grab my iPad here. I'm going to run a calculator because I'm not that good with math in my head, and I want to make sure I get the numbers right. So if we're talking a typical flight school here in the Orlando area, we're going to use nice, round, easy numbers. We're going to say the rental for the airplane is $200 an hour. So I'm going to throw $200 into my calculator here. And you're required to do minimum 40 hours. So 200 times 40 is $8,000. So you are $8,000 on just the rental of the airplane. And again, that's at 40 hours, the bare minimum for the FAA. So now we have to add in our flight instructor. The average flight instructor that you get charged for as a student in the Orlando market is roughly $75. And you have to have them for a minimum of 20 hours. So 75 times 20 is $1,500. So if we do the $1,500 plus the $8,000 that we already talked about earlier, you're at $9,500. Pure training, nothing else, no extras, no bells and whistles. You hit everything in minimums. You needed the instructor in the right seat for the bare minimum, and you used the bare minimum hours. So, can I make a video or a school make a video on here and say, hey, get your private pilot done, earn that certificate for $9,500? Sure, because the math works. But let's be honest, very few people actually take their check ride at the bare minimum FAA standard of 40 hours. I myself know of one person. I'm not going to toot my own horn, but it was me. I did it in 35 hours because I went to a 141 school. I'm very good with picking things up as far as machinery goes and driving things. So again, there's that. I've talked to many people. I'm sure there are others out there. I know I'm not the only one to ever do that, and I'm not saying I am. But it is very, very rare that someone goes and makes their certificate in the minimum amount of hours. But this is what a flight school is going to quote you. They might throw some extras in there, and they might come back and say, hey, you know what? It's going to be 11 $11,000, $10,000, maybe $12,000. Because they're going to throw in a bunch of different things. They're going to charge you for ground school, all that other stuff. It all adds up on top. But when you go to a flight school and they show you numbers, no matter what it is, 99.9% of flight schools are going to show you the bare minimum, what the FAA requires as far as a price to get that certificate. Again, very few people ever actually hit those hours. So let's see what a regular average with the national average pilot would take and what they would spend to get it. So let's say, well, we don't have to let's say, 65 hours is the national average. So let's use those numbers. So if we take $65 or 65 hours and we times that by $200 an hour, because again, we're using an average airplane rental in Orlando, that is $13,000. So right there, we're over everything I just previously quoted. So you're talking $13,000 you're paying out of pocket for just the airplane rental. Nothing else, no CFI in the left or in the right seat. So let's say you're doing 65 hours, you kind of got the hang of it near the end, and you spent 40 hours with a CFI. So again, so let's remember $13,000. So if we do $75 an hour times 40 hours with our flight instructor, that's $3,000. 3,000 plus the 13,000 gives us $16,000 for your private pilot certificate sitting here in 2025. That is an average student. Now again, there's a lot that is not mixed into that number. I'm not counting ground courses, any ground training. I obviously didn't count the medical. I didn't count the check ride. All that stuff is extra money. Materials that you're going to need, whether it's books to study, navigational charts, a plotter, E6B calculator, all these other things you're going to need for training. I didn't factor into that. All I did was the national average, which is 65 hours to get your private pilot certificate and 40 hours of the CFI in the right seat. So that's 25 hours that you are flying solo out there to get your private pilot certificate. And we're at $16,000. So sure, a lot of places, if you go in, you look online, they're going to say get your private pilot certificate, and we'll call it and we'll say $10,000 to $15,000. Can it be done? Yes. Will it be done? Odds are it won't. So what do I say here in 2025? Can I do it for those low numbers? Can I get someone through it? Yeah, I can get someone through it. It's going to be tough. It's going to take dedication on your part as a student. But yeah, it can be done. I'm living proof that you can do it in FAA minimums. But realistically, it's not. So what would my advice be for you if you were going to become a private student and you wanted to kind of set a budget to kind of understand where you're going to end up as far as cost out of pocket to get this rating? I say roughly budget about $20,000. Obviously, if we come in under that, you're much happier than if we go over that number. But I recommend that you set aside about $20,000, and then obviously we shoot to kind of get you done faster, save some money along the way. There's things we can do to save money along the way also. But again, if we're talking the $20,000, again, you got to have money on the side for your check ride. Roughly budget about $1,000. It's not going to cost $1,000, but still budget $1,000 for it. You're going to have to go get your medical. It's going to be roughly $150 depending on where you go. You're going to need books and stuff like that. So I don't know, count $300 for books and different materials and everything else you need. But again, I always like to over budget things so that way we come in lower. Then kind of say, hey, I'm going to get you done for $5,000. And then next thing you know, you're $20,000 into this and you're pissed off at me and everyone else. So that's just basic, simple math of what it's going to cost to get your private pilot's license. And that's how schools are going to show it to you. They're going to show you that bare minimum price. Why? Because they know people shop based on price. If I'm sitting here and I'm saying, hey, it's going to cost $20,000 to get your private pilot's license today with me, and you go to the school down the street or another instructor and they say, hey, guess what? With me, it's only going to cost 12. Okay, cool. What's the difference? The difference is I quoted you based on the national average, what a typical student will take to do it. They quoted you based on an overachiever that's going to hit it in minimums. Now, you're going to end up spending probably on average the same amount of money. The difference is they're using that lower number to get you through the door and get you into their school. They're not conducting business honestly. The schools out there that are conducting business honestly are going to say this is the minimum, this is the average. They're going to show you both of those numbers so you know what to expect. But if they're just showing you that the bare minimum number, and that's all they're showing you as far as cost to go it, guess what? I'm sorry to tell you, they're hiding something. They're lying. That's not a place that you want to do business with, because if they're lying about that number, what else are they going to lie about down the road? So that's all I have for this one this week. If you enjoyed this, check out this other video here on the screen, and I'll see you next time.